Officially kicking off Noir's Halloween Shocktober list is the very disturbing, very brilliant, free-to-download game Doki Doki Literature Club. The success and popularity of this game can not only attribute itself to reaching well over 1 million downloads within the first few months of its release, but also the presence of its pop-up booths at various nationwide conventions, such as MomoCon and Anime Expo. I was in attendance at Anime Expo almost 2 years ago, shortly after playing the game, and saw firsthand the hundreds of Doki Doki Literature Club fans waiting for hours in lines that encircled literally the entire booth and spilled out into the aisles of the convention. While I have been waiting literally the last year and a half to discuss this masterpiece of a game, I'm going to pause things for a second and issue a very strong, very serious spoiler and trigger content warning for this particular review. The game itself is memorable within the first 10 or 15 seconds of its startup for its direct content warning screen. And for this review, I strongly recommend that if you are easily disturbed by graphic content and images that are considered, well, disturbing and graphic, are under the age of 17, or struggle with depression and/or anxiety, it's probably best that you don't continue watching this further, much less play the game itself. And I'm really speaking from experience on this one. Trust me when I say I thought that despite my struggles with anxiety and depression, along with my desensitization towards certain graphic content, I audaciously believed that I would be okay playing this game. Spoiler alert, I was not. And it's no exaggeration when I say this is a game in which its mechanics are specifically designed to mess with you throughout the entire playthrough of the game, particularly psychologically. And I'm not just talking about the excellent jump scares either. For days after my first playthrough, I was in one hell of a dark place. And it really wasn't until recently, i.e. 2 years later, that I found myself able to sit through a second playthrough. All the same, I still consider this to be one of my favorite games of all time, and certainly one of the most impactful. That said, and if you're still determined to stick around and don't mind major in-game spoilers, let's dive right into the history of the game itself. Doki Doki Literature Club is a free-to-download visual novel published by indie game company Team Salvato. The game itself was met with genuine shock and awe, mostly shock, for being a flawless deconstruction and subversion of the popular visual novel and dating sim tropes and mechanics that span this very popular and often overlapping genres of games. The allure for many fans, such as myself, are the key components of choice and consequences, or rather, the illusion of choice, particularly in regards to your prospective dating choices and their respective branching playable routes. In these types of games, your answers and choices make or break the outcome of the story, usually leading to one or even multiple endings. Another alluring feature of this genre is that many games will allow you to save, so if you make a choice that negatively impacts your playthrough or leads to an undesired result, you can always go back to your last save point and pick the desired answer or choice. Doki Doki Literature Club takes these core components to the literal extreme, where one seemingly harmless or correct answer or choice can very well lead to you discovering the body of your childhood best friend after she's committed suicide. And part of what makes Doki Doki Literature Club so meta, so impactful, is the lesson that, very much like real life, you can't always undo the choices you've made. Another great aspect of the game is how it uses the in-game mechanic of poetry writing to not only advance the plot, but also give you insight and background into the lives of your potential romantic interests. It's also really worth mentioning that each poem you, the protagonist, write will have specific keywords correlating to your potential romantic aspect, and the words you choose to compose your poem with play a very, very large role in whose storyline you end up playing. It's a genius mechanic, and one of the main factors that, as a writer, initially drew me to the game in the first place. But what really draws you and hooks you in is the character progression throughout the course of the storyline. The game introduces 4 NPC, or non-playable characters, each fitting a specific stereotypical and archetypical character trope. You've got your bubbly childhood best friend Sayori, the quiet and reserved bookworm Yuri, and the short and tsundere Natsuki. And of course, the reliable class president type Monica. Out of all 4 girls, only the fan favorite Monica is able to be pursued as a romantic interest for reasons that become significant to the overall plot of the game. And as you go about learning more and more about Yuri, Natsuki, and Sayori, you can glean through their actions, dialogue, and poetry that these girls are complete subversions of their character archetypes. In fact, I would go so far as to say that how quickly you figure out the plot and the backstories of these characters and how the game's overall immersion experience psychologically affects you can be determined by how much knowledge you have of mental and emotional disorders. You're far more likely to understand the plot and deeply relate to the characters if you, like myself, actually struggle with mental and emotional disorders and have experienced past traumas. I myself was able to pick up almost immediately that the happy-go-lucky Sayori struggles deeply with depression, that Yuri engages in self-harm, specifically the act of cutting, and that Natsuki's tsundere-ness and anger is the result of being horribly abused by a trusted adult figure in her life. And because such very real-life themes are so prevalently explored throughout the game, you can easily understand the game's warning about being a landmine of triggers for people who struggle with depression or have suffered from some form of complex trauma. That leads me to my final point of what makes Doki Doki Literature Club so immersive and incredible. It's obvious that Team Salvato took painstaking steps of creating characters that accurately portray the realities of what it is like living with mental and emotional disorders, and the effects of how trauma can shape a person. It's no exaggeration to say that one of the primary reasons for Doki Doki Literature Club's critical success is that it does a far better job of portraying and addressing these topics way better than most forms of current media out there. Plus, it comes with a bonus well-hidden, and I mean very well-hidden, story within a story if you dive deep enough into the subtext and into the literal files of the game itself. And that's just one of many things that makes Doki Doki Literature Club easily one of the best games to come out within recent years. If you're still interested in playing the game for yourself, and I recommend that you do, you can download the game for free on Team Salvato's website for PC and Mac. Drop in the comments if you've played this game, what you enjoyed about it, and tune in tomorrow as we continue Noir's SHOCKtober Halloween series with a major throwback Thursday to one of the most memorable and famously fucked up series from the early 2000s, Higurashi no Kokoro ni, famously known as When They Cry.